Humanity stayed silent, then it roared. Part 1. The council chamber stretched wider than some planetary capitals. 1,000 species gathered in the crystalline halls of Nexus Prime, their voices echoing off walls that had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic governance. Representatives from across known space debated trade routes, territorial disputes, and the endless administrative machinery that kept civilization turning. In seat 847, tucked between the delegation and an empty chair reserved for a species that went extinct 2 centuries ago, sat Ambassador Sarah. She had held this position for 12 years, following a long line of human representatives stretching back 300 years. Like all who came before her, she sat quietly and watched. The Empire's military commander, General, was speaking. His 4 arms gestured dramatically as his translator device rendered his clicks and whistles into galactic common. The Pelion cluster falls within our historical sphere of influence. The 17 primitive species there require proper guidance. The Empire will assume administrative control immediately. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Han Collective's representative, an ancient being that looked like living crystal, pulsed with soft blue light. The Council recognizes historical claims to the region. However, the matter of the indigenous populations must be handled according to standard protocols. Of course, said, his mandibles clicking in what passed for a smile. We will follow all proper procedures. Sarah made a note on her. She had heard similar words before. The proper procedures usually meant the natives would be relocated to reservations while their worlds were strip-mined. It was legal. Everything the major powers did was legal because they wrote the laws. The Commerce League's representative spoke next, its gelatinous body rippling. The League would like to negotiate mining rights once the transition is complete. Naturally, replied, our species have always enjoyed profitable partnerships. The vote proceeded exactly as everyone knew it would. The major powers approved. The minor powers abstained or voted against, knowing their votes meant nothing. The motion carried. The Pelion cluster would become territory within 60 standard days. Sarah raised her hand. The chamber didn't notice at first. Humans rarely spoke in council sessions. When they did, it was usually to acknowledge some new restriction on their activities or to vote in favor of whatever the major powers wanted. Sarah had to raise her hand higher before the current speaker, a trade minister, paused mid-sentence. The chair recognizes the human representative, the speaker said, sounding faintly surprised. Sarah stood. 300 years ago, when humanity first encountered the Galactic Council, they had been so eager to join. They had come in peace, with modest ships and open hands, asking to be part of something greater than themselves. The Council had welcomed them with a stack of treaties that restricted human expansion to a handful of systems, limited their trade, forbade certain technologies, and placed humans firmly at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. Humanity had signed everything. They had smiled and nodded and taken their seat in the back of the chamber, and they had stayed quiet. I want to acknowledge the Council's decision regarding the Pelion cluster, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the translator system. I would like to note for the record that the indigenous species there have filed formal protests. They have requested protection under Treaty 445C, which guarantees developing civilizations the right to self-determination. Slaff was like rocks grinding together. The human representative misunderstands. The Pelion species are pre-industrial. They lack the capability to make such determinations. Treaty 445C makes no mention of industrial capacity as a requirement, Sarah replied. It only requires that a species demonstrates complex social organization and abstract reasoning. The Pelion meet both criteria. This is a waste of the Council's time, the Han representative said. The matter has been decided. Sarah remained standing. I simply wanted to ensure the record was clear. Thank you. She sat down. Around the chamber, representatives exchanged glances. Some looked annoyed, others seemed amused. The delegation was laughing openly. After the session ended, Sarah walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime. The station was a marvel of engineering, built by the hand ago. Humans weren't allowed to study its construction too closely. That technology was restricted. Her assistant caught up with her. "That went well," he said dryly. "About as expected. Command is asking if we should prepare for the next phase." Sarah nodded slowly. "Tell them to wait. We follow the process to the end." Over the following weeks, the situation in the Pelion cluster deteriorated. They arrived with occupation forces. The indigenous populations resisted peacefully at first, then with increasing desperation. Images flooded across galactic networks, Pelion families being forced from their homes, cities being demolished to make way for mining operations, protests being broken up with military force. The Council issued a statement expressing concern and urging restraint from all parties. Humanity sent humanitarian ships, unarmed vessels filled with medical supplies, food, and temporary shelters. They didn't ask permission, they simply went. The fleet intercepted them at the edge of the cluster. General himself commanded the blockade. His message was broadcast across all channels. "The human vessels will turn back immediately. This region is under authority." The human ships slowed but didn't turn around. Their commander, Captain Rachel, replied simply, "We are conducting humanitarian relief under Treaty 892F, which guarantees free passage for non-military aid missions in regions experiencing civilian displacement." "This system is closed to outside interference," growled. "We are not interfering. We are providing aid. Our ships carry no weapons. Your presence here is an act of aggression. We will not turn back." There was a long pause, then gave the order. The warship's weapons lit up the void. The lead human vessel, the UNCS Mercy, died instantly. 2,000 people aboard gone in a flash of energy. The other ships scattered, fleeing back toward human space. The galaxy watched the footage. The Council convened an emergency session, defended his actions, citing security concerns and the need to maintain order. The human ships should have with authority. This was an unfortunate but understandable response to provocation. The Council agreed to form a committee to investigate the incident. They projected it would take 18 months to complete their findings. Sarah stood in the Council chamber for the second time in 3 months. This time, every eye was on her. The laughter was gone. In its place was something cautious, wary. "300 years ago," Sarah began, her voice quiet but clear, "humanity came to you in peace. We wanted to join your civilization. We wanted to be part of something greater. You gave us treaties to sign, restrictions to accept, rules to follow, and we did, every single one." She looked at, "We did this because we believed in law. We believed that if we proved ourselves to be responsible, peaceful, and trustworthy, we would eventually be treated as equals. We believed that the system you created, for all its flaws, was built on principles that mattered." The chamber was absolutely silent. "We stayed silent when you mocked us. We stayed silent when you restricted our growth. We stayed silent when you ignored our input and treated us as barely worthy of acknowledgement. We stayed silent because we had faith that eventually the arc of galactic justice would bend toward fairness." Sarah's hands gripped the podium. 2,000 humans died 3 days ago. They were doctors, engineers, aid workers. They were unarmed. Their only crime was trying to help people you were crushing, and you killed them. "It was a military necessity," said. "It was murder. And this Council will do nothing about it because you never do. The committees, the investigations, the statements of concern, they are theater. The only law that matters here is power. The strong do what they will. The weak suffer what they must." The hand representative pulsed with an angry red light. "The human representative will control her tone. No, Sarah said. I will not. 300 years of controlling our tone has accomplished nothing. So let me be very clear. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from all treaties restricting our sovereign development. We will honor our commitments to species who have honored theirs. But we will no longer accept limitations imposed by powers who treat law as a suggestion when it suits them. The chamber erupted. Dozens of species tried to speak at once. The speaker's calls for order went ignored. His voice cut through the chaos. This is an act of war. Sarah met his gaze. No, this is an act of self-determination, something you seem to think only applies to major powers. The Council will not tolerate this rebellion, the representative said. Economic sanctions will be imposed immediately. Your species will be isolated until you see reason. Then impose them, Sarah said. We are done seeking your approval. She turned and walked toward the exit, fell in beside her along with their security detail. Behind them, the council dissolved into shouting. Threats flew. Alliances were declared. By the time Sarah reached her ship, 36 species had announced they would support action against humanity. On the journey back to Earth, Sarah sat in her quarters and stared at the stars. 300 years of preparation, 300 years of patience, 300 years of building, planning, and waiting for this inevitable moment. The message came from Earth Command before they reached Sol System. It was simple: status. Sarah replied with a single word: committed. They gave humanity 30 days to reconsider, 30 days to come back to the Council, apologize, and accept whatever punishment the major powers deemed appropriate. 30 days to remember its place in the galactic order. The Empire assembled its fleet. 10,000 warships gathered at their military stations, the largest show of force in modern history. Would command them personally. He would crush this human rebellion and remind the galaxy what happened to species who forgot their station. Other powers contributed ships. The Hand sent 2,000. Another 1,000. Even minor powers eager to curry favor with the major species sent a few vessels each. By the time the 30 days ended, 15,000 warships sat poised at the edge of space. Humanity's response was broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. Ambassador's face appeared on billions of screens, her expression calm and resolved. We stayed silent, she said. For 300 years we listened, we learned, and we waited. We gave you every chance to live up to your own principles. You have refused. So now we will speak in the only language you seem to understand. We will roar, and the galaxy will hear us. The fleet advanced toward human space, toward Earth, toward what they believed would be a quick and decisive victory against an upstart species that had forgotten its place. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Part 2. The Armada moved through space like a dark tide. 15,000 ships, their hulls bristling with weapons, their reactors burning hot enough to light up sensor arrays across 3 sectors. General stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable conquest, and felt satisfaction settle into his bones. This was what power looked like. This was what happened when lesser species forgot their place. ETA to human border, 4 standard hours, his tactical officer reported. Any sign of their fleet? Nothing yet, General. Our scouts report minimal activity in the border systems. Clicked his mandibles together. They are hiding behind their planets, hoping we will show mercy. We will not. The fleet crossed into human-claimed space without resistance. The border stations were empty, their crews evacuated. Automated warnings played on repeat, telling them to turn back, ordered them destroyed. The stations exploded like distant fireworks. Pathetic, he said. They abandoned their own defenses. But his intelligence officer, Commander, was studying the sensor data with growing unease. General, the power signatures from those stations were unusual. They were drawing massive amounts of energy before we destroyed them. So, they were probably trying to activate shields. Shields don't require that much power, sir. And the energy was cycling outward, not inward. Waved a dismissive claw. You see threats in shadows. The humans are running. We advance to their inner systems. The fleet pushed deeper into human territory. They passed empty colonies, abandoned mining operations, and silent orbital facilities. Every human settlement they encountered had been evacuated. It was as if the entire species had simply fled before them. "This is wrong," muttered. "Where are they?" They got their answer in the system, 3 jumps from Earth. The fleet emerged from FTL in standard formation, 15,000 ships spreading across the system in a carefully orchestrated deployment. Was already composing his victory message when the void came alive. The first wave hit them from the asteroid belt. Not ships, weapons platforms. Hundreds of them hidden among the rocks, their signatures masked by the system's natural radiation. They fired in perfect synchronization, targeting the fleet's outer formations. 300 ships died in the first 10 seconds. "Evasive maneuvers," roared, "return fire." But there was nothing to return fire at. The platforms were small, mobile, and numerous. They fired, relocated, and fired again. The ships, massive and powerful, found themselves trying to swat flies with sledgehammers. "They're everywhere," the tactical officer shouted. "We're reading weapons signatures from the belt, from the outer planet's moons, from debris fields we scanned as clear." "How is this possible?" His voice was grim. "Those border stations, they weren't defense platforms, they were sensor relays. The humans knew exactly where we would jump in. They had 300 years to prepare this system." Another wave of fire. Another 200 ships destroyed or crippled. The fleet tried to advance, but every direction led into more ambushes. The humans had turned an entire star system into a trap. "We have superior numbers," said. "Form up and push through. We will overwhelm them with volume of fire." But the humans didn't fight like they expected. They didn't hold positions and trade shots. They struck, vanished, and struck again from a new angle. They targeted power systems, not armor. They disabled ships rather than destroying them, turning the fleet's numbers into a liability as damaged vessels collided with their neighbors. After 6 hours of fighting, had lost 3,000 ships. He hadn't seen a single human vessel. "Pull back," he finally ordered. "Regroup at the edge of the system." The fleet retreated, leaving hundreds of damaged ships behind. As the human weapons platforms went silent. No pursuit, no final attacks, just a single message broadcast across all channels. Ambassador's face appeared on their screens. "This is the border of human space. You may leave now. This is your only warning." Smashed his claw against his command console. "We do not retreat. We do not yield to threats from cattle." But as he stared at the casualty reports, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The humans had killed 3,000 ships without losing a single one of their own. They had turned the art of war into something he didn't recognize. The message reached the Council within hours. The other powers responded immediately. If humanity could do this to they could do it to anyone. The Hand committed another 5,000 ships. The called up their merchant marine and converted cargo vessels to troop carriers. Minor powers, terrified of what human defiance might mean for the galactic order, sent what they could spare. Within a week, 30,000 ships had assembled. It was the largest military force in recorded history. Surely, the major powers reasoned, no amount of tricks and traps could stand against such overwhelming might. Humanity's response came not from Ambassador, but from someone else entirely. Admiral James appeared on galactic networks, wearing the dark blue uniform of the United Nations Defense Command. "For 300 years," he said, "we have been students of war, not our own history. We knew that well enough. No, we studied you. Every species in this fleet, we have analyzed your tactics, your strategies, your weaknesses. We know how to rely on brute force. We know how to hand coordinate through hive mind patterns. We know how to calculate acceptable losses in economic terms. He leaned forward. You taught us that power is the only language that matters, so let us speak clearly. Come to Saul if you dare, but know this, you will not be fighting the war you expect. You will be fighting the war we prepared for you. The transmission ended. The galaxy held its breath. The fleet advanced, 30,000 ships moving in a coordinated wall of steel and fire. They jumped into the system in 3 waves, overwhelming the defensive platforms through sheer numbers. The cost was high, another 2,000 ships lost, but they pushed through. System after system fell the same way. The humans fought for every meter of space, but slowly, inevitably, they fell back. The fleet lost ships with every advance, but there were always more. The major powers had committed to this course, and their pride wouldn't let them turn back now. By the time they reached the outer edge of the Sol system, the fleet had been reduced to 22,000 ships. But they were at Earth's doorstep. Humanity's lay before them, defended by what sensors indicated was fewer than 1,000 human vessels. Finally said, they will make their stand here, good, we will crush them completely. The fleet arranged itself in a hammer formation, preparing to drive straight through the human defenses. The hand ships formed the center, their crystalline hulls able to take tremendous punishment. They took the flanks, ready to envelop any human counterattack. The smaller powers hung back as reserves. On Earth, Admiral stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Around him, holographic displays showed the incoming fleet. His staff worked quietly, efficiently. They had trained for this moment for decades. All platforms report ready, his tactical officer said. All ships in position, his fleet commander added. And the guests asked. A new voice spoke from the communication station. The Pelian Alliance has arrived, Admiral. They're broadcasting their solidarity with humanity. Allowed himself a small smile. The 17 species of the Pelian cluster, armed with ships humanity had helped them build. Dozens of minor powers that humanity had aided over the centuries, arriving to stand with the species that had stood for them. They didn't have many ships, maybe 3,000 total, but their presence meant something more than numbers. And the Council dissidents. The fleet is here, the Renan Collective, even a few hand-splinter groups who oppose the collective's decision, another 2,000 ships. 6,000 allies, against 22,000 Council forces, still heavily outnumbered, but hadn't built his strategy around numbers. Activate the defensive grid, he ordered. Across the Sol system, weapons platforms came online, not just in the asteroid belt this time, everywhere. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn, the ice of the belt, the dark spaces between planets, 300 years of construction, all of it hidden in plain sight, dismissed by Council inspectors as mining operations or research stations. But there was more. Ships began throughout the system, not 1,000, 10,000. Humanity had let the Council see what it expected to see, a small, weak fleet. The real Navy had been waiting in the dark. My God, the tactical officer whispered, we actually have numerical parity. No, said quietly. We have advantage. They've been bleeding for weeks getting here. They're tired, their formations are damaged, and their commanders are overconfident. We're fighting in our home system, where every rock and piece of debris is a potential weapon. He looked at the fleet commander. Send the signal to our allies. It's time to show the galaxy that the age of empires is over. The Council fleet advanced, confident in their victory. They had come too far to turn back now. Earth would fall, and humanity would be made an example. They didn't know that humanity had spent 300 years preparing for exactly this moment. They didn't know that every simulation, every war game, every strategic analysis had been focused on a single question. How do you defeat an enemy with superior numbers and technology? The answer was about to be written in fire across the void of space. Part 3. The Battle of Saul began with deception. As the Council fleet advanced in its hammer formation, sensors detected the human fleet moving to intercept. It appeared to be a defensive wall, positioned between the approaching armada and Earth. Exactly what the Council commanders expected, a desperate last stand at humanity's. General studied the formation from his rebuilt flagship. They planned to make us pay for every meter. Predictable. All ships prepare to engage. We will punch through their center and force them to. The human fleet vanished, every ship gone in an instant. Watt stared at his displays. Where did they go? Stealth systems, sir. They've engaged full electronic countermeasures. Our sensors can't track them. Then use visual. They can't hide 10,000 ships. But they could. In the darkness of space, with no stars behind them, the human ships had become ghosts. And while the Council fleet searched frantically for an enemy they could no longer see, the real attack came from somewhere else entirely. The first wave hit the Council's rear formations. The Allied fleet, Pelion, Renan, and the others, struck from above the orbital plane, where the Council had placed only light screening forces. These weren't the half-drained militia the Council expected. These were ships built with human help, armed with human weapons, fighting with tactics humanity had taught them. The Council's rear guard broke in minutes, transport ships exploded, supply vessels scattered, the neat formation dissolved into chaos. Rear guard is collapsing, shouted at, we need to redirect. The human fleet reappeared, but not where they'd vanished. They emerged from 3 different vectors, their stealth systems dropping all at once. And they weren't attacking the Council's strengths, they were attacking its weaknesses. Human ships swarmed the hand crystalline vessels, the ones forming the hammer's point. But they didn't try to break through the heavy armor. Instead, they fired on the resonance frequencies that Han used to coordinate their hive-mind communications. The crystalline ships began operating independently, their perfect coordination shattered. Other human ships hit the flanks, but not head-on. They came from odd angles, firing and retreating, never holding still long enough for this superior firepower to matter. It was like trying to fight smoke. And everywhere, the weapons platforms added their fire. Hidden mines activated. Asteroids that were actually hollowed-out weapon systems opened fire. The void became a maze of death, and only the humans knew the way through. Admiral watched the battle unfold from his command center. Around him, his staff coordinated thousands of ships and platforms, the result of centuries of planning coming to fruition. They are trying to reform their lines, his tactical officer reported. Let them target package Sierra, show them what happens when they cluster up. Deep in the asteroid belt, a weapon that had taken 50 years to build and another 50 to hide activated. The mass driver, built into an asteroid the size of a small moon, launched its payload. A solid slug of iron and tungsten, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, crossed the solar system in minutes. It hit the center of the reforming formation. The kinetic energy was apocalyptic. The initial impact destroyed 17 ships. The debris cloud took out another 40. The shockwave disrupted every sensor and communication system in a 1,000,000-kilometer radius. Watched his fleet disintegrate. Ships collided with each other trying to evade fire they couldn't see coming. Communications were jammed. Formations meant nothing when you couldn't coordinate. His massive numerical advantage was becoming a liability. There were simply too many Council ships trying to operate in too small a space, and they were getting in each other's way. Sir, we need to pull back, regroup outside the system. No, slammed his claws down. We do not retreat. All ships advance toward Earth. If we can reach the planet, we can hold it hostage, force them to surrender or watch their burn. It was the worst decision he could have made. The human fleet parted before the Council advance, letting them push deeper into the system, toward Earth, toward what looked like victory, and into the teeth of humanity's final trap. The inner system defense grid activated all at once. It wasn't weapons platforms this time. It was something else entirely. Humanity had spent 3 centuries learning everything they could about Council weapons technology. They'd analyzed every ship design, every energy signature, every tactical doctrine. And they'd built counters for all of it. Directed electromagnetic pulses swept through the advancing Council ships. The technology was illegal under 3 different treaties, except humanity wasn't bound by those treaties anymore. Ships, designed around hardy but simple electronics, died by the hundreds. Vessels, their organic computers vulnerable to specific frequencies, went dark. The hand crystalline ships fared better, until humanity activated another system, sonic resonators that set up standing waves in the crystalline structures. The ships didn't explode. They simply shattered, cracking along fault lines as their own hulls tore themselves apart. In less than an hour, 10,000 Council ships had been disabled or destroyed. The remaining 12,000 were scattered across the system, cut off from command and control, fighting individual battles against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. Aboard what was left of his flagship, General finally understood. The humans hadn't just prepared defenses. They'd prepared a perfect storm of technologies and tactics specifically designed to counter every advantage the Council possessed. They'd studied their enemy for 3 centuries and then built a war machine to exploit every single weakness. "We cannot win this," Commander said quietly. "Sir, we must order a retreat." Looked at his tactical displays. His fleet was broken. His allies were in disarray, and the humans were offering corridors for retreat, carefully marked lanes where ships would not be fired upon if they left the system immediately. They were being given mercy, being offered the chance to leave with what remained of their forces. The humiliation was worse than death. "All ships," said, his voice heavy with defeat. "General retreat. All vessels fall back to the rally point outside human space." The Council fleet fled. Behind them, Admiral watched them go. He could have pressed the attack, could have destroyed them completely. But that wasn't the goal. The goal was to prove a point. The galaxy watched the greatest military force in its history break and run from a species they had dismissed as weak. The images flooded across every network, every news feed, every diplomatic channel. Humanity hadn't just won. They dominated. And they'd done it by being smarter, better prepared, and more willing to adapt than their enemies. The Battle of Saul was over, but the real fight, the fight for what came next, was just beginning. 3 months later, the Galactic Council reconvened. The crystalline halls of Nexus Prime felt different now. The seats that had once held victorious representatives of the major powers now held beings who looked diminished, uncertain. Ambassador Sarah walked to the central podium. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her walked representatives from the Pelian cluster, from dozens of species that had supported humanity or suffered under the old order. 3 months ago, Sarah began, this council sent a fleet to destroy us because we refused to accept our place in your hierarchy. That fleet is gone. Not destroyed, we let them leave, because this was never about conquest. It was about one simple principle: we will not be anyone's subjects. She looked across the chamber. The Han Collective's representative was there, but not the same one. The old leader had been removed after the defeat. The new one watched Sarah with wary respect. Was gone entirely. They had executed him for his failure. His replacement sat silently, diminished. "You asked how we became so powerful," Sarah continued. "The answer is simple. You gave us 300 years to prepare. While you grew complacent, secure in your power, we worked. Every restriction you placed on us, we found a way around. Every treaty you forced us to sign, we studied for loopholes. Every insult you gave us, we swallowed and remembered. You taught us that in this galaxy only power commands respect, so we became powerful. But we did it the hard way, through patience, planning, and sacrifice. We didn't conquer anyone. We didn't enslave anyone. We built. We prepared. And when you finally pushed us too far, we were ready." The chamber was silent, 1,000 species waiting to hear what came next. "We propose a new council," Sarah said, "one with actual enforcement mechanisms, one where the law applies to everyone, not just the weak, one where developing species have rights that cannot be by historical claims or economic interests, one where might does not automatically make right." The representative rippled with what might have been laughter. "And why would we agree to this? You have won one battle. You do not control the galaxy." "No," Sarah agreed. "But we've proven that the old order can be challenged. We've shown every minor species, every developing world, every oppressed population that they don't have to accept domination. How long before others follow our example? How many wars do you want to fight?" She pulled up a holographic display. 47 species have already contacted us, asking for alliance. 23 have formally withdrawn from council treaties pending reforms. The galaxy is changing whether you like it or not. The only question is whether we do this peacefully or whether you force everyone to fight for their freedom the way we did. The debate that followed lasted 3 weeks. The major powers argued, threatened, and postured, but they had seen what happened to those who pushed humanity too far, and they had seen how many species were willing to stand with humanity against them. In the end, the reforms passed. Not everything humanity wanted, compromises had to be made, but enough. Protections for developing species, real enforcement mechanisms, a rebalancing of power away from the ancient empires and towards something more equitable. The major powers voted for it because they had no choice. The alternative was watching their order collapse entirely. After the final vote, Sarah stood in the observation deck of the human embassy station, looking out at the stars. Joined her, carrying 2 glasses of something that might have been whiskey. "We did it," he said quietly. "We survived," Sarah corrected. "Whether we did it remains to be seen. The reforms only work if we can enforce them." The fleet. "The fleet is being demobilized. We're keeping enough for defense, but we're not going to be the galaxy's police force. That's not who we are." Sipped his drink. "Some people are calling you the mother of the new galactic order." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Some people are calling me the woman who started the war that nearly destroyed civilization." "Both things can be true." They stood in silence for a while, watching ships come and go from the station. Trade vessels from 100 worlds, diplomatic shuttles, the machinery of galactic civilization, slowly adapting to a new reality. "Do you think they've learned?" asked. "Really learned?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Some of them, maybe. The ones who understand that the old ways led to this. But empires don't like giving up power. They'll test us, push the boundaries, see how far they can go before we push back." "And will we?" "If we have to." She turned to face him. "That's the thing they still don't understand. We didn't want this. We don't want to be warriors. We don't want to police the galaxy or impose our will on others. We just wanted to be left alone to build our civilization in peace." "But we will fight," said, "if pushed." "If pushed," Sarah agreed. "We stayed silent for 300 years. We gave them every chance. And when they left us no choice, we roared. That's the lesson they need to remember. Don't mistake patience for weakness. Don't mistake silence for acceptance. Because the only thing more dangerous than a species that conquers is a species that chooses not to until you leave them no other option." Years passed. The reforms held more or less. There were violations, of course, small incidents, territories disputed, species that tried to exploit loopholes, but the galaxy had changed fundamentally. The old order of unchecked empires was over. New species continued to arrive at the galactic stage. Each one faced the same question: how would they find their place among the stars? When they appeared, young and eager and naive, Sarah was there to meet them. She was older now, her hair white, her face lined with the weight of decades of diplomacy. but her eyes were still sharp. The ambassador reminded her of herself 300 years ago, when humanity had first arrived, full of hope and wonder, wanting desperately to be part of something greater. "Welcome to the Galactic Council," Sarah said warmly. "I'm sure you have many questions." "We do," they said. "We've heard stories about humanity, about the war, about how you changed everything. We want to know, how did you know when to stop being silent?" Sarah smiled. "That's the question, isn't it? The answer is you wait, you learn, you build. You give the system every chance to work, but you never forget that silence is a choice, not a surrender. And when the time comes, when you've given them every opportunity and they've shown you that nothing else will work, then you speak. Clearly, loudly, in a voice that cannot be ignored." "And if we're faced with impossible odds," they asked, "if